Warning that Syria is possibly preparing for another chemical weapons attack. They're warning Assad that his regime is going to pay a, quote, heavy price if they do it again, that being a chemical weapons attack like we have seen in the past. CNN's Barbara Starr live for us at the Pentagon. She has breaking details. What can you tell us, Barbara?
Good morning, Brianna. It was an extraordinary late-night statement from the White House with no follow-up so far this morning that has got everybody's attention from Washington to Moscow to Damascus. The White House putting out a statement, let me quickly read part of it, saying, and I quote, "The United States has identified potential preparations for another chemical weapons attack by the Assad regime that would likely result in the mass murder of civilians, including innocent children." Now, the White House also saying if the Assad regime goes through with this, it will pay a heavy price. Moscow, a short time ago, the Kremlin firing back, calling this statement unacceptable, although the Kremlin has said that Russia is opposed to the use of chemical weapons. All of this coming, oddly enough, as Syrian state media today put out images of Assad meeting with wounded troops in Syria, sort of the Syrian propaganda machine that the world has come to know so well, gearing up yet again. So look, where are we on this? What could the intelligence be that the White House is talking about? Last time, it was a combination of communications, intercepts, and overhead imagery that led the U.S. to be certain in its view that Syria was behind that chemical weapons attack in April. We will have to see how all this sorts out and what the White House is willing to say about what it knows. Chris?
All right, Barbara Starr, this is a big deal no matter where the intel is coming from. Thank you very much. You're going to hear a lot of political comparisons to President Obama and his red line. Don't get caught up in that jazz. What matters right now is what would this mean for the United States if another attack like this happens? And why is the White House showing its hand so soon? Our panel will take this on next.
The White House issuing an unusual statement overnight saying that Syria is preparing another chemical weapons attack, also warning Bashar al-Assad that they're going to pay a heavy price if he follows through on this. Let's bring back Chris Cillizza and David Drucker, and also joining our conversation now is retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. Okay, so General, I want to read what the White House put out overnight. It says the United States has identified potential preparations for another chemical weapons attack by the Assad regime that would likely result in the mass murder of civilians, including innocent children. The activities are similar to preparations the regime made before its April 4th, 2017 chemical weapons attack. Goes on to say that the United States is in Syria to eliminate ISIS. If, however, Mr. Assad conducts another mass murder attack using chemical weapons, he and his military will pay a heavy price. Why say this now? What is the White House, in your estimation, trying to achieve?
I'm not sure, Brianna, other than a warning. It seems to go against, as Chris said earlier, what a candidate said on the campaign trail about warning our enemies what we were going to do next. And this is very different from the last attack in Syria. Then it was a reaction to a strike. Now we're talking about the potential for preemption of a strike based on whatever kind of intelligence, whether it's human intelligence on the ground saying this is going to happen, overhead imagery that's showing planes being loaded, or some type of communication that we're overhearing. So all of those things are a little bit different than that reactionary strike a few weeks ago, and it causes some challenges because the command, Central Command, claimed last night they had not heard anything about a potential strike. So we're talking also about the challenges associated with communication and collaboration on a whole of government approach.
All right, let's say they're right. General, quick follow-up, then please, Chris, David, weigh in as you see fit. Let's say they're right. They have good intel, just like they did last time. They have an opportunity to see this coming. What are the Americans' options in terms of what they would do if this line is crossed? And we should remind people of what the effects were of that chemical attack on the citizens there last time. Put up the pictures of it. You have to remind the urgency of doing this to your own people. You're going to see children. You're going to see their parents. You're going to see them in different states of distress with very little capability on the ground there to help them. So, General, what's your insight on that part?
Well, what you're going to see, Chris, is either another TLAM, Tomahawk strike, which is unmanned, or you're going to see some type of aircraft strike that will go in, along with hopefully some diplomatic effort. All of those things in a preemptive strike, after it's been announced, have all sorts of changes of capabilities. Because in that TLAM strike, remember, we gave the president gave a little bit of warning before he conducted that strike. It was less than a couple of hours. Right now, you now have a warning where Russian air defense systems can be turned on, people can prepare, bases can be unmanned, so you have a whole lot different perspective. And plus, if you send a manned strike in, you would have to send in not only the bombers and the fighters, but you would also have to send in the jammers to make sure those Russian air defense systems, which are pretty prevalent across Syria, don't get turned on.
David, what are your thoughts when you see this warning?
Well, this is really fascinating because this is 180 degrees opposed to, in a sense, how President Trump, as a candidate, said he would conduct U.S. foreign policy. He was very critical of past Republicans for being too active in the Middle East and, in a sense, being too active in trying to be the dominant power in the Middle East. He talked about defeating ISIS. He talked about being more aggressive militarily to handle our enemies. But he very similar, in fact, to President Obama, talked about taking a lighter approach and not getting as involved. And what we have here is an administration now that is not just sort of reasserting American influence in the Middle East in terms of our actions, but if you look at the warning that came from Ambassador Haley, saying to Iran and Russia, this includes you, this is a sort of another interesting dichotomy where we have the president often coddling Vladimir Putin in Russia, but his top lieutenants and advisors sending a message that we're not going to put up with intransigence, especially in this region where Russia has really been competing with us and trying to push us out. So to me, that's what's most interesting about the threatened strike. And it could be a message to Russia, in a sense, seeing what they plan to do about something to avoid action by us. And assert, in a sense, our hegemony back over the region where Iran has been moving in and Russia has been standing pat in Syria.
So, Chris, you see a fairly stark plus-minus. General, correct me if this is an improper analysis, but on the plus side, you come out early, you say if you do this, you cross this line, you have trouble. They know America can deliver. Maybe Assad thinks better of whatever plan our intelligence, U.S. intelligence, suggests he must do. The negative side is, once a line is crossed, now you must act. Must, in quotes, because things can get complicated. How do you see it?
Well, two things. First, I think that so much of what Donald Trump does, what motivates him, is less policy conviction than undo or do things related to Barack Obama. Particularly as it relates to this red line, obviously Donald Trump viewed that, and many Republicans viewed it as sort of the inefficacy, easy for me to say, of Barack Obama's foreign policy, that he would say things and then not follow up on them. The strikes in Syria earlier this year, Donald Trump viewed as sort of a way to say, see, I'm not that guy. I think this is a way to say, I'm not going to be that guy, so be under no illusion. The thing that is hard, and the Trump administration does this in both foreign and domestic policy, and the general mentioned this, is there's not a whole lot of context or case here. It sort of comes out of nowhere. It's on a Monday night. You don't have a coordinated response. There's a little bit of confusion as to what specifically is the threat here. There's a little bit of confusion as to this is a president who said we shouldn't warn of our tactics, we shouldn't reveal our tactics. So they do a lot of things in which they just act, and then it's not clear that the case behind it has been made. That said, I do think that Donald Trump wants the world to know, David touched on this, he wants the world to know that there is a different sheriff in town, that in his view, Barack Obama's threats were largely meaningless to the world, and he wants the world to know that his threats will not be. I think, broadly speaking, this is in keeping with that.
General Hertling, when you look at this, though, this is something that clearly, and we're going to learn more about this today, sends a message. Ultimately, whatever the president does, do you see it as a data point on this question of what is the Trump doctrine?
It is a data point on that, Brianna. It's also a data point on what is the Trump strategy for the Middle East, but it's also what is the data point for the Trump strategy according to the world. Because we can't take this part of the Middle East in a vacuum, especially with the players involved. There are things going on all over the world, in Europe, in Ukraine, where Russia is involved, where Russia has given some warnings to the United States about what they will and will not accept. If we're going to draw the line and then react to it, okay, that's good, but let's have a strategy for what the end state is. Right. And what I'd further what Chris said, yes, it was announced late last night, and that was about 6 o'clock in Syria. 6 a.m. in Syria. So they now have had an entire day to think about it while we're just beginning to talk about it here on the East Coast.
All right, General, gentlemen, thank you so much.